What precipitated you to start the fridge, to turn that into, to go jump from being a musician to a businesswoman?
That was a massive leap. We define ourselves to ourselves. And a lot of it for me personally was giving myself permission to do the thing that I was wanting to do. Because I thought that in a bizarre way that someone else would be more skilled or more adept.
So how did your talk go at Sharjah Entrepreneurship Festival today?
We just had a really energetic session outside in the sort of little mini amphitheatre. And Big Hass was an absolute delight to chat with. It helps that we've known each other for a long time. But he's such a force of nature and has been so linked to the music scene. So just a pleasure. Lovely audience.
You must know everyone.
It feels that way now. You don't realise, but as you go along. So I've seen Sons of Yusuf popping along, and so we've had a really good catch-up because, in fact, their first performance in the UAE was with the Fridge.
Yeah.
And then, of course, today we also have Music Travel Love, who are performing, and we've done massive projects with them in Abu Dhabi through the whole of last year, which generated, something like over 70 million views.
Wow.
So, the legacy is all wrapped in, so it's always lovely to see old friends and colleagues.
Yeah, well, the Fridge has just been wound through. If you are involved in arts and life or arts and culture, I was the editor at The National, and I always heard about the Fridge, and I always heard about you, and it was just one of those things. It's like, who's behind that? There's got to be. So I'm just curious, because you came in 1997
Correct.
From South Africa?
Yes.
So what brought you here?
What brought me here was a very insistent developer who was working together with Jumeirah International Group. So I started my life next to the fake palm tree in the lobby of the Jumeirah Beach Hotel. And it just so happened to be, for those who can remember that far back, the movie that was huge in 1997 was none other than Titanic. Right. And I would be asked up to 15 times a day to play My Heart Will Go On.
On your harp, you're a harpist. How does one become a harpist? Does your mom say, this is what I want you to do? Or do you, as a little girl, say, I don't know, or something in between?
Yeah, no, the latter. So in my case, and it's so fascinating. I don't know, as humans, this thing that we come in with, the nature-nurture sort of question. And in my case, absolutely this burning desire from my parents said I started to talk about the harp from the age of 4. I grew up in a city, Port Elizabeth in South Africa. There was no orchestra. I couldn't see, there was no live harp in town. Nobody played. We didn't even have a TV because TV only came years later. And so it was purely through hearing this on vinyl, hearing the harp. And all I wanted to do was play the harp. But it was very deeply rooted inside, in that I wanted to play the harp not only because of the sound. I couldn't wait to have the feeling of creating that sound, the physical sensation of plucking the strings, of holding the intervals and creating sounds in that way. And that's something that gave me huge pleasure through my career as a harpist. So with no access to harp, I started on piano, and then when I was 11 or 12 years old, started violin. And I went to study music, but I only started the harp when I was 20. Didn't think it would become a career, took over my life, and I played orchestrally for a good few years, probably only 3 years actually, doing wonderful full orchestral repertoire with a little bit of opera and ballet, which was just ideal. And then fell into a corporate playing career, really the sort of world of entertainment, led very much by the market here in the UAE. So essentially what convinced me to come was my instrument was cracking. So a harp has almost 1 3/4 tons of tension, pulling on what is a purely wooden frame. And while the wood obviously mellows with time like a gorgeous violin, like the Stradivarius famous instruments, the same thing happens with the harp, but with so much more tension on the frame, there is stress and strain. And so there was a huge crack, and the instrument couldn't be brought up to pitch anymore. And of course I needed it for my living. And so I thought, well, a little dollar dollar tax-free little nest egg for the harp was in order. And so I came for 5 months, and that was 27 years ago.
Oh my gosh, I came for 1 year and that was 17 years ago. How many people say that, right?
Totally.
But you came for 5 months just to play the harp, get your new harp, and then go back home.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what happened in that 5 months?
So in that 5 months, it went very well. In those years, Sheikh Mohammed was using the Jumeirah Beach Hotel almost like his day-to-day office, and was having a number of meetings with his advisors at the restaurant right at the end of the pier. And so honestly, he would be through that hotel at least once or twice a week in that era. And so also fell to playing for those where he liked the presence of the harp. So yeah, the hotel asked me if I would please stay on. So I stayed another 3 months, and that's kind of how the first year went. And then decided to, I really was very much part of the rock climbing community. Mm-hmm. There's amazing trad climbing with a fabulous person who lived in Ras Al Khaimah called John Gregory, who was really the founding father of climbing in the UAE. And so it was a wonderful combination of playing during the week, and then weekends spent with super talented climbers out in a fabulous community with dead silence, like you only get in the desert. In those wadis, and that balance, I thought, well, look, let me give this a try.
Yeah. And so you're playing the harp, you're rock climbing, and when did you start thinking, oh, I can, like, what precipitated you to start the Fridge, to turn that into, to go jump from being a musician to a businesswoman?
That was a massive leap, as you say, and it has a lot to do, and I've realized this. And I still realize this about myself, and I think ourselves, that we define ourselves to ourselves. And a lot of it for me personally was giving myself permission to do the thing that I was wanting to do, because I thought that in a bizarre way that someone else would be more skilled or more adept. And so I saw myself obviously very much as this harpist. And what ensued was I freelanced as a harpist for 10 years. I developed this bubble that I played inside, which has gone global now. That's the whole concept of a bubble on a stage with an instrument inside of it. And witnessed and played for the openings of literally all of the iconic properties and anniversaries over that time.
You were the go-to.
It wasn't an event unless you had the harp, or there were a couple of other musicians. There was a singer called Salah, who came from Oman, and she was an amazing voice, and she was another one. So between us and then Kamal Musalam, who was an amazing fusion oud player from Jordan, the three of us ruled.
The golden era. The golden decade of music.
But I think, so also alongside eventually giving myself permission was this feeling of frustration that I loved what I did, but performing, unless of course you have a Coldplay type career or a leading career where you, obviously that is an exciting landscape to be in, but where you're simply playing performance after performance, I had an absolute yearning to commit myself to something that I could build on.
Right.
That's something where I could lay, and then the next day lay. Yeah. And that feeling of constructing something that could stand. Yeah. And putting my energies into that, because so much energy into performance, and of course no sooner have you performed than you're only as good as your next performance. Sort of thing. Okay, you have your reputation, but it's relatively repetitious. And then eventually it was Bong Guero who he worked in many different fashion and also brag as a brand back in the day. It was just an innocent tea with him. And he just said to me completely nonchalantly, so when are you going to start your agency? Why? And
weird.
It was so odd because he didn't know what I was thinking. We didn't catch up that often. And again, tapping into that, giving yourself permission. I've said this to him, but he would never know what that comment, hearing it from someone else who just assumed, what's wrong with you? Why haven't you done this already? Yeah. I realized, okay, if someone else can actually see that, then why don't I?
That is so important. There's specific times in my life where I've had the same thing. Where I thought, they think I can do it. I feel like choked up about it a little bit. And I think it's so important also when we get older that we do it for people, right? Because it's like, well, I don't know why we need that, but we do.
It's so bizarre because, of course, you're brave. It's ludicrous looking back. I think, why wouldn't you think? Exactly. But it
well,
is.
Why? Like, you're thinking this is crazy. I can't do it, but I have the yearning to do it. Yeah. But really, there was no one else there to do it. And what? You're going to have a you that's like an expert in business and had the musical background. Like, you can't have all that in one person, right? It's just things that we limit ourselves.
We do.
Yeah.
And it's something I still struggle with
really
now. So I think, and it becomes more interesting now. Many people have grown up with the brand of the fridge. The influence has been rich in their lives, particularly for a number of musicians, but then also audience. And for some people, there's this sort of aura. But it's quite, there's quite a contrast for me because I find that in my head, I'm always thinking where I'm not, you tend to think ahead. And so I inevitably fight this feeling like, what have I done? I feel like I've done nothing. because there's always...
you built this entire empire and this ecosystem that didn't exist. But in your mind, you know where you want it to go. So you're like, not there. So you're falling.
No, not there. So, yeah.
This is a funny thing, I think, because I do this for myself. I saw the other day, there's this sort of like over-functioning social media bent that's going on now. And it said, are you always moving the bar for yourself? And I thought, yeah, I am. Like, I don't know that I'm going to stop doing that, though. Like, I don't know I don't know how to stop doing that.
No, I think if anything, you want to increase the number of times that you move the bar and to push yourself into, but it remains an interesting thing because it is a push. And I think of myself as a risk taker. Mm-hmm. I'm highly entrepreneurial. And I definitely have the vision of myself that I'm generally brave, but I'm reminded time and time again that I'm actually not as brave as I think I am.
Well, what is that? Feel the fear and do it anyway? Or courage is not the absence of fear. It's feeling the fear and doing it anyway. I like thinking about that because I think people think you weren't scared. People aren't scared. It's like, no, I am scared. I just did it. And Terrified. Then you do it and then...
Yeah. And even today, as I sit here, with what I have in mind, with where I'm wanting to grow to, because I'm not one of those people who I'm envious of those, one meets a few of them who sort of see exactly where they are going to be 10 years from now. Mm-hmm. I don't. But I do see today where I want to be tomorrow, or let's say 3 years. Yeah. But which means you constantly getting to the point, and I'm just amazed at how much of myself I have to get over each time, even though I've proved it to myself.
Oh yeah, it's the human fight. Why did you call it the fridge?
Oh. There is a sort of a cool jargon explanation I could give you, but I can't properly remember it.
Okay.
But the real there's a sense of cool things in the fridge. There's a sense of a collective in the fridge, and there's also a bit of a sense of humor of being in such a hot environment and having something called the fridge. But ultimately, also behind it all, I'd created quite a brand. As to thinking out of the box, just as an artist myself, mm-hmm. and as a harpist, and I wanted to carry forward some of that legacy without sort of branding the agency with my name. And so the fridge comes from Shelley Frost. So that was the link in.
Can you just give us a quick overview of how you started out and where you ended up right now?
Okay, how far back are we going?
Well, when you started out, you wanted to start an agency.
Yes.
But there was also a performance aspect to it, giving people a place to perform. So how did it form?
Absolutely. So right from the start, and this was something I realized I'd held in me since childhood as well, along with the desire to pluck strings, that it didn't even need thinking about. The fridge was in a warehouse space. It was in a multi-purpose space that was dual usage. So the fridges only had two homes. One was I started in Alcos 4, which I would never do today. I don't know what I'm thinking. But Alcos 4, right up against Alcale Road, where no one knew where Alcale Road was in 2007. And it was a warehouse space. And then we moved 12 years ago to Al Sakal Avenue. And they were keen to really grow the cultural offering. And they were transitioning at that point from businesses in warehouses to that cultural line, which we see they've followed through so magnificently over the last 12 years or so specifically. So the fridge started very much with live performance in mind and wanting to champion artists and champion original content because of this cry of that I heard discussed many times, that I know you heard going, there's no culture here. Yeah. That understanding that where there are people, there is culture. So what essentially was missing were platforms. And to take us back to 2007, the only venues were ballrooms of hotels, and ballrooms of hotels. That was it. There was no Dubai Opera, which still seems like such a blessing to me. The Emirates Palace hadn't been built with their gorgeous auditorium. Madinat hadn't been built with their theatre.
In 2007, that's crazy.
Nothing.
Yeah.
And so there was a real cry, and content was presented in quite an expat fashion, in the ballrooms over dinner, dinner and a concert. Yeah. So, gosh, thinking back to that, so much has changed. So the platform being intrinsic, very much wanting to be the link between artist and industry. From the start, it was important that the business was self-funding. And I think that's been an important model from the very beginning of the fridge. And I'd learned that really in miniature from my own career, where I would do certain things which would pay the bills on the corporate front. And then I would do artistic or cultural projects, which perhaps didn't. Right. And that dual existence was always very important to me. And I took that very strongly into the fridge. So we always had a very strong corporate side to what we did. So in the early days, we were booking musicians for hotels and servicing the food and beverage industry. And that was an important lifeline for artists living here as well as for our growth if we were going to do anything and create any platform of any meaning. Because the platform itself doesn't generate enough to warrant the space, nor the technical backup that is needed to really do a performance that the musicians here are worthy of to put it on.
Interesting. I used to cover city council years ago in Canada and Ottawa, and I know there were great arts foundations, but they're always on the brink of collapse. Yeah. Theater companies, and I just remember thinking there has to be a way that they're just not coming begging to the city council, and then the depends who's in power, and they can pull it, and so you just sort of like cut around that.
Absolutely, and I felt that really important for independence, and I wanted that because I didn't want to be beholden to the content. Yeah. I also didn't want to have to try to make money from the concerts as such. Nice. Those were about whatever the content was, and then whoever came to see it comes to see it. So that was a very important part of that has been a very important part of the success of the business. Is I have a great respect and encourage artists to do the same, or anybody in creative industries to have a great respect for corporate work, for that transactional part of the creative industries, but then not to confuse that with the cultural side and the development. And perhaps when you command a certain fee, depending on who you are as an artist, but if I'm talking more about the developing and also, you know, strong middle range, obviously once you reach A-list, it's a slightly different story. But for most artists, that you know you've got your worth sorted out on the corporate side, or your what's the word I'm looking for, financial security, but then not to get hung up on that, and then immovable, that you don't take part in projects that don't have that same budget attached to them, and being able to see those two coexisting smoothly, I think, is essential to be successful artistically for most people. And I see artists grappling with that in different ways. The being open to rehearse, to work on a passion project where there's basically nothing in it, is so important. And so that's something that the Fridge always espoused as an organisation. So, and to this day, it's something we do. We do the things that enable us to pay our salaries, have a stable environment, and to have a space to offer. And then we do mad things that earn nothing.
Like, what's an example?
Thanks to the passionate team. So we'll put on, festivals. We'll program wildly. I think one of the amount of time and energy that goes into things that don't have a bottom line attached to them. I think one of the more inspiring examples I would like to give is the opportunity of Expo 2020 coming. And it was vital to everybody within the Fridge organization, and this is why I adore the team. I mean, there's only so much you can go on vision. You need those who share that same vision and put in the same energy, which the staff within the Fridge, the team in the Fridge over the years have always done. We felt it absolutely vital that a footprint as large as Expo 2020, with the investment attached to it, that it would be heinous if that would take place in the city and not leave some indelible mark within the creative industries for having passed. And for us, that was making things very, very real. So I use a popular band whose sound really represents the UAE in many ways, called Noon. They're a fusion inspired fabulousness, hard to put in a pocket. And we didn't speak to only them. We spoke to all of the musicians, leading musicians living in the UAE, and said, if you could play with anyone, who would it be? And took those. In the case of Noon, it was a band called Snarky Puppy, who were their absolute heroes. And we made sure Expo didn't have the bandwidth necessarily, with everything going on, to take care of that level of detail. But I think the importance of organizations like the Fridge, and it's not only the Fridge, I think in any ecosystem, the importance of organizations who know your artists, who you're able to make those links. So I think the most amazing thing was seeing the team put in the energy it took to orchestrate against all odds these amazing hookups where we would co-program. So in the case of Noon opened for Snarky Puppy, we made part of the programming a collab moment. So actually played with Snarky Puppy on stage, and the conversations which will continue on from that. For many artists was something they really hold dear. But there was no incentive. Literally no incentive for us to do that, other than the passion and the belief in what it takes to build something. And then there are countless examples like that where the team put in so much extra energy behind the scenes because it makes the difference with a communicative scene. And I think we live in such a fascinating environment where I can't think of anywhere else on the planet other than here or Saudi where the entertainment and cultural industries are so linked, where government spend has such a massive, on events, within events, have such a massive impact on how you can then grow things culturally. And that fascinates me, is the discussion between those two and how they interlocute, and the more thinking you can be on a cultural perspective as to what you're doing within the entertainment side of things, you can see a really interesting growth. Again, with that idea of whether in this fast-moving sort of new world space, there aren't necessarily the grants or the infrastructure in place as there are for, as you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation. And in a way, that is really healthy because of this learning. I think there's something to be gained to where we work out how to create a sustainable model between all of us.
Well, the model that exists, like I said, it doesn't really, it's not very healthy.
No.
To just depend on one source for your funding and then always. I don't even think I think it's detrimental to the entire creative process. It has to be when you're constantly worrying about your survival.
Yeah.
As an artist, you're probably worrying about that a lot anyway. But how is your own harp playing? Is it suffered or is it thrived? Or how does it, do you still play? Do you perform?
Very seldom. Okay. For small little things. So mostly now I do, if someone really asks, they want, normally it's something personal that I feel I want to perform for. But actually the last thing I've done was I did 21 years of Christmas Eves at Al Maha Desert Resort. Ooh. And hung up my harp at the end of 2023, at the end of 21 years. So those little traditions and all the relationships around them. But yeah, in terms of performance, very, very, very seldom now. Although I do have a sneaky little album on that's out on platforms. You can find it on Spotify. It's called Waiting.
Okay.
Because I did wait a very long time.
Did you? I love that name. And you got that harp. Have you had other harps since? The harp you came here to get?
I got 3 harps.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So I have 2 electric harps. One little harp called the Baby Blue.
Okay.
I love the work that Kamak does. Okay. They're not a no-name generally, but in the harping world they are. Yeah. And they've made so many inroads into their design. Okay. And they're fabulous instruments.
So you've moved into bigger events, like stadium-sized events. You've brought some...
Yes.
Yeah.
We've always had a very inclusive approach right from the outset of the Fridge in 2007, and felt for a long time that looking at the demographics within the UAE, within the concerts being hosted in arenas, and felt very strongly that the Filipino community and artists were undervalued. Yeah. And so very proud to say that we really broke open that market by being the first agency to ever program standalone A-list Filipino talent.
That's mind-boggling. That took until 2023. Yeah. That's because anyone who's lived here knows that people from the Philippines are always singing. They're rocking the bands and the bars. They're just I don't know much about the music there, but that just seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah. So,
but I'm not saying it's a no-brainer. I'm it's crazy that no one thought about it before, attempted it before.
Yeah. So now I think, that's well and truly opened things, and there's some amazing talent coming through from the Philippines. So we opened with Ben and Ben, and then we were very fortunate to work with Sarah G and Bamboo in a dual concert that they've done. So there were performances that were done before, but they were normally racked up with 4 or 5 different bands, but really giving it that production value.
Mm-hmm. Makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So you started in Saudi?
Yes.
So where do you, to wrap this up, where are you moving the goal post for yourself right now? Where has it moved to?
I'm fascinated around the subject, and it's something we discussed together with Big House today in the session, actually, around creating more of a functional ecosystem. You mentioned Saudi, and it's really exciting to have Saudi in the market. And that has opened up so much potential and possibility. Now it is possible to organize tours within the region. And I think I'm looking forward to being part of ongoing and increased conversation which looks at much more coordinated collaboration and a really serious look at how we can grow the music industry. It's exciting to see the way Saudi is taking this on, because they are really focused on how to develop a sustainable music industry. Okay. And that's something that in the UAE we haven't had quite the same focus. And I think that with Saudi having this focus and an incredible push in the region, I think we're all going to benefit from this.
Well done. Thank you.